Now, video games are such expansive, often evolving entities that the vast majority of players simply can't see or experience everything an individual title has to offer. As such, will often blissfully be ignorant about the finer details, which, if inspected with a bit more scrutiny, reveal some rather disturbing and even horrifying truths we probably wished we never knew. With this in mind, I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horrifying video game implications we just learned. Number 10. The foam is bodily fluid. Foam stars. The recently released Splatoon-like foam stars hasn't exactly set the gaming world on fire, though at a cursory glance it at least seemed like a totally harmless, family-friendly multiplayer shooter, right? Well, those who have given the game a try on launch soon enough came to realise that there's a little more questionable content than expected, as the backstory for protagonist Soa reveals a side-eye-inducing origin story for the game's voluminous foam. Now, they state that the foam is actually a bodily fluid which she and presumably other characters can secrete, as proves to be a source of embarrassment for her. The game doesn't go into much detail beyond that, but this seems to explain where at least some of the ever-present foam featured in the game comes from. It seems like a bizarre, almost fetishized inclusion for a game clearly aimed at younger players, and while Splatoon also certainly has central characters that secrete ink, it's important to remember that they are squids. They're also kids, and that absolutely makes sense somehow. Having characters randomly produce foam from their bodies though, ew. Number 9. Jill's ageless appearance is because of the T-virus, Resident Evil. If you've ever wondered why Jill Valentine doesn't really seem to have aged a day since she was introduced in the original Resident Evil game almost 3 decades ago, despite the franchise's other characters generally looking pretty worse for wear over time, the series has finally come up with a rather hilarious/horrifying explanation for it. You see, in last year's CGI animated film Resident Evil Death Island, which is set between the 6th and 7th mainline games, Jill looks just as youthful as she did in the original trilogy, and an official character bio reveals that this is actually a side effect of her T-virus infection at the hands of the Nemesis in Resident Evil 3. So though Jill was eventually cured of the T-virus, she still benefits from this residual symptom, which is pretty much just a mega contrived way for Capcom to keep using the fresh-faced new Jill character model from the recent remake of Resident Evil 3. Number 8. You can talk to the corpse bed, Baldur's Gate 3. So Baldur's Gate 3 features the necromancy spell Speak with Dead, allowing players to grant temporary life to dead entities and ask them questions. And yet, did you know that you can use it in the most unsettlingly unlikely of circumstances? That's right, you can use the spell not only to speak to the individual corpses, but also Orthan Jurgir's infamous corpse bed, which is, well, exactly what it sounds like. Cast Speak with Dead on the bed and you will trigger a special cutscene in which the tangle of corpses, the narrator's words not ours, answer your questions as one single tortured entity. Though you can glean some pretty useful information from this chit-chat, it's such a disturbingly unexpected flourish from Larian Studios to include in the game that you might struggle to pay attention to a single damn word that they're saying. All the same, props to the developer for their mind-boggling attention to detail throughout. They didn't need to do this thing, but we're kind of glad they did. Number 7. The Strange Man is probably Cain, Red Dead Redemption 2. So the Strange Man is one of the Red Dead franchise's most memorable minor characters, having first appeared in Red Dead Redemption as an NPC stranger who cryptically hints at John Marston's impending demise, and in a creepily blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo form in the sequel. Fans have theorized ever since the first game that the man in question could very well be Satan or God, though Rockstar themselves refused to confirm the matter either way. And while this isn't canon, a fan theory went viral back in 2021 when Redditor user Basketball Juice made an ironclad case that the Strange Man is actually Cain, a figure from the Book of Genesis who was both the first human born and the first murderer. Cain famously killed his brother Abel and then lied to God about it, leaving him cursed for life and doomed to walk the earth forevermore. Now, Basketball Juice points out numerous similarities between the Strange Man and Cain throughout the game, perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence being that John attempts to shoot the Strange Man 3 times, only for John to then be shot 21 times himself in the game's brutal climax. And the relevance of this? Well, Genesis 4:15 says, "Therefore whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And what's 3 multiplied by 7? 21, of course. Again, Rockstar themselves haven't confirmed the intent, but it fits so perfectly and eerily that it's incredibly easy to accept it as true until proven otherwise. Number 6. It was almost an army recruitment tool, Fortnite. Now, nobody's going to argue that Fortnite isn't aimed squarely at children, and this makes the recent attempt to turn the game into a recruitment tool for the British Army that much more disgusting. Back in January, the British Army released promotional materials for Operation Belong, a recruitment event set to take place in Fortnite later that month, where players would be invited to take part in an army-style boot camp. In a more craven attempt to lure in the young'uns, the promo also featured the likeness of YouTuber LZ the Witch and musician Young Philly, who was set to be taking each other on in-game during the event. Unsurprisingly, the dystopian notion of using one of the most popular video games ever to sell the army to impressionable children, especially at a time where army troop numbers are dropping to unprecedented levels, received a swift online backlash. Epic, who later confirmed that they didn't create the collab, ultimately decided to place the planned island in moderation. And given that it still hasn't been released weeks later, it seems like the crass ploy has most likely been abandoned. Number 5. Nintendo wants you to find Ganon robust and sexy. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. The Legend of Zelda's Ganon has been many things over the years, but a fine slab of man meat? Not really. But that all changed with the series' most recent release, Tears of the Kingdom, where Ganon sported a more buff, aesthetically pleasing appearance, enough so that fans hilariously bestowed him with the affectionate nickname Rehydrated Ganon, noting how crusty and dried out he looked in earlier previews of the game. And in an interview late last year, Tears director Hidemaro Fujibayashi revealed that this was an entirely conscious feat on the part of the design team to make the series' iconic villain look, in his own words, robust and sexy. The task was ultimately given to the game's art director, who reportedly had a sparkle in his eyes when he was told that he could give Ganon a glow-up for the ages. As instinctively nauseating as it might be to hear the words Ganon and sexy in the same sentence after what we've seen in the previous games, at least we're moving past the evil equals ugly trope in fiction. Number 4. Donald Trump was almost a playable character. Tekken 7. In the lead up to the recent release of Tekken 8, franchise director and producer Katsuhiro Harada revealed something that he probably should have just kept to himself, that Donald Trump was almost a playable DLC character in the 7th game. Now, Harada and fellow Tekken producer Michael Murray were in the US when Trump won the 2016 presidential election, at which point they started discussing putting him in the game. After Harada suggested to Murray that they could include Trump free of legal recourse due to the President of the United States not being a character that requires a license, the pair began discussing what Trump's fighting style and rage arts would be. However, the duo abruptly nixed plans to include Trump when their Uber driver overheard the conversation and loudly shouted "F*** Donald Trump" while accelerating to 125 miles per hour. While on one hand, it's hilarious to consider the prospect of Trump being in a Tekken game, his sheer stink would have polluted the purity of the hit fighting game franchise, and they were right to keep him well away. And speaking of stinky, let's talk about number 3, and how Chocobos smell like horses? Final Fantasy franchise. Now, as much as we'd all probably like to believe that Final Fantasy's Chocobos smell like sweet chocolate, well, that's just not the case. While the RPG franchise has made it clear over the years that the iconic avian creatures give off a rather potent whiff, until now we didn't know precisely what that meant. In a recent video where Game Informer asked Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi 129 rapid-fire questions, one of the more eccentric among them was for him to clarify exactly what the creature smelt like. Hamaguchi replied that Chocobos smell pretty bad and similar to a horse, implying that the strong whiff of the series' NPCs are so averse to its manure or manure-like substances. And this kind of makes sense given that Chocobos are basically Final Fantasy's version of horses, having been domesticated for transporting people and items, and also, of course, racing. All the same, in a world as fantastical as this, it would have been nice to say that they smell like something, well, less offensive than shit. Number 2. Joel's corpse was originally going to be a jump scare. The Last of Us Part 2. Because The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't already upsetting enough, the recent remaster includes 3 lost pre-alpha levels which were cut during development. One of these levels sees Ellie navigating Seattle's sewer system, and as she crawls through a section of the sewer, she discovers a clicker clinging to the side of the pipe. As Ellie attempts to crawl past, however, her torch suddenly starts malfunctioning, and when the light comes back on, the clicker has been replaced with Joel's bloodied and beaten corpse. It's a rather cruel trick to take a beloved character who was killed earlier on in the game and turn them into a damn jump scare, yet that wasn't actually the reason that the level was cut. According to game director Neil Druckmann, the segment was axed primarily for pacing reasons. Either way, thanks for that, Neil, and you probably could have just, never told us about this pure nightmare fuel at all, let alone invite us to play it for ourselves. And number 1, Goombas hurt Mario by biting him. Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Ever since the Mario series' inception, Goombas have always managed to deal damage to everyone's favourite digital plumber simply by coming into contact with him. However, it's largely been a mystery as to precisely how the Goombas are hurting Mario merely by bumping into him. That is, until now. In an interview as part of Nintendo's Ask a Developer series last October, Super Mario Bros. Wonder's art director mentioned that Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, once asked this question himself and revealed that the Goombas are actually biting Mario when they touch him. However, due to hardware limitations of the earlier Mario games, that was never actually realized on screen. And in a belated response to this, in the most recent Mario release, Nintendo went out of their way to create an over-the-top biting animation for the Goombas, confirming beyond any doubt what they're actually doing to poor old Mario.